Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is my first video on here, so thank you for watching and please leave a like and comment if you agree or disagree with my takes. Today, we are discussing the top 10 centers in NBA history. Before we start, let's go over a little bit of the criteria for this list. Most important for me is peak performance. I'm doing a 7-year peak because personally I believe 5 is just a little too short, 10 is way too long, 7 is right in the middle. So if you dominated for more than half a decade, you're meeting that midway point, I'm counting that as your peak. Next is era played in. So if you played against 8 teams, I am going to hold that against you. Because it is a fact that basketball has evolved. So, if you dominated in a big era, like for me personally, the 90s and early 2000s is still the prime big man era. Actually, late 80s to early 2000s. That is when the best big men in the NBA played. However, we are going through a little big man renaissance right now. You feel me? All these skilled big men over here, they showing out nowadays too. So the return of the big man is definitely coming in. So hopefully in a couple years, we can see a few of these people climb into the top 10. That being said, if you dominated in a weaker area such as like the 70s, the 60s, or the 50s, don't worry, there's no one from the 50s. But, well, there's one person from the 50s. But if you dominated in that era, it is going to be held against you. I will also be looking heavily at advanced stats and efficiency. So they will be weighed equally with traditional stats. I'm not going to totally throw out traditional stats out the water because especially back in the 90s, I feel like traditional stats, the 90s and before, traditional stats couldn't tell a good story about what you truly were as a number one option. While I believe nowadays advanced stats definitely show us a more accurate picture of today's games, I feel like traditional stats do show you a decent picture of, a more accurate picture, I should say, of the previous eras. We will also be weighing career accolades such as MVPs, All-NBA teams, etc. It's important that a player received enough recognition because they're receiving recognition at the time of their career. It shows that we're not just showing them as top 10 due to their stat dominance. It was all viewed by their peers as well. And of course, performance in big games, most notably finals appearances, that will be weighed heavily in this because that is where we separate the men from the boys, you feel me? If you're truly a big-time center, a big-time performer, you're not going to shrink when it matters most. And lastly, and most importantly, of course, this is my opinion. Feel free to disagree with me, of course. As a matter of fact, if you disagree with me, I'd like to see your comments in the comment section. Show me some reasons why you disagree, or show me some reasons why you think, hey, it's a fire-ass list. All right, so now before we start, I'd like to get in a couple of honorable mentions before we get to number 10, and that's going to be Joel Embiid. I just need to see a little bit more from Joel Embiid, in all honesty, and I need to just see more team success because individually, he's definitely a top 10 player. I just need more longevity and more availability. He does miss a lot more games than you'd expect. Another honorable mention, Bill Walton, very, very short peak, injury-riddled, but probably one of the most skilled big men of his era, and maybe a little overrated due to him being a UCLA Bruin. Next is Willis Reed from the Knicks. I feel like that finals appearance where he came in injured is very overrated, but overall, Hall of Fame big man, definitely worth an honorable mention. Bob Lanier, that's another one. Great player during the 70s, early 80s for the Pistons, and later on the Bucks. Three defensive demons here, actually. We'll go Dikembe Mutombo, Alonzo Mourning, and, of course, Nate the Great Thurman. All right, they had some great years, but overall, they just fell a little short of this list. And, of course, George Mikan. I'm a Laker fan, all right, so I'm going to be a little biased here. I never saw him play, obviously. My grandpa probably didn't even see this motherfucker play, but he dominated against some plumbers, so he ain't going to be on this list. Robert Parrish, another honorable mention, played in a big role with those Celtics teams, but overall, he really was never considered a top 5 center in the league. And our last honorable mention, Wes Unseld. Small-ass center, but he played way bigger than his size and actually won a championship. He was the closest one to getting a spot on this list, other than Joel Embiid. All right, now let's get to number 10. At number 10, we got Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing used his 7-foot, 240-pound frame and 7-foot 3-inch wingspan to challenge shots and score over defenders in the post and in the mid-range. In his great career, he made 11 All-Star selections, 7 All NBA teams, 1 first team and 6 second team selections, 3 second team All Defense selections. He won Rookie of the Year and was on 2 NBA anniversary teams. He finished top 25 all time in points, rebounds, and 7th in blocks. Ewing's offensive repertoire consisted of an unguardable baseline jumper, overpowering his matchup in the post, and he was also athletic enough to blow past his matchup while facing up and driving to the rim. Defensively, he constantly altered shots at an elite level. Some negatives to his games were that he was not a good decision maker when making passes, he was slightly inefficient as a scorer in some seasons, and was only an average rebounder. He was also a little over-aggressive as a shot blocker, resulting in foul trouble on more than a few occasions, as well as being out of position in the paint, allowing people to finish over him. As you can see by his stats that he put up, he was an amazing player for one of the biggest franchises in the league, and that's one of the reasons I think he gets a little overrated too, is that he started on the Knicks. He never won a ring there, of course, but he started on the Knicks. He was the face of one of the franchises that the league is most heavily invested in, wanting to see succeed. So they were really pushing him out there, but overall, he was still a great player. The main reason I have him on this list, too, is that he was great in the best era of bigs, I believe. He didn't get overshadowed or nothing like that. He held his own. He was very good, and he at least always led the Knicks to the playoffs every time he was there, which is a very big accomplishment considering the era that he was among the best bigs. The other major thing stopping him from being higher on this list is that he completely shit himself when he had to face Hakeem Olajuwon in the finals. Yeah, it was a 7-game series, but don't let that fool you. Patrick Ewing did not have a good series at all. He averaged an inefficient 18.9 points per game in that series and shot 36.3% from the field and only got to the line 3 times per game, so he was not getting to the line often. He was missing a lot of shots. Hakeem just had his way with him. With all that being said, he did have a winning record in the playoffs, and overall, he was a very good performer for many years on one of the elite franchises, so he is at number 10. Now let's get to number 9. At number 9, we got Dwight Howard. Dwight is arguably the most disrespected player in NBA history. Dwight used his tremendous athletic ability, his 6'10", 265-pound frame, and 7'5" wingspan to dominate during his prime, specifically on defense. During his disrespected career, Dwight Howard amassed 8 All-Star selections, 8 All-NBA selections, 5 first team, 1 second team, 2 third teams, 5 All-Defense selections, 4 first teams and 1 second team, and 3 Defensive Player of the Years. He also led the league in rebounds 5 times and led the league in blocks 2 times as well. He finished top 15 all time in rebounds, blocks, and field goal percentage, and has 1 NBA championship on his resume, while he lost another. Dwight's offensive game mostly consisted of catching lobs, driving to the rim, and a lot of putbacks. Defensively, however, he was a menace who challenged and blocked every shot and pulled in every rebound he could get. Some negatives to his game were his lack of awareness. He never was a very good passer, and that sucks because he definitely got a lot of attention every time he got the ball down low. He was not very capable of kicking it out. He also never developed a true post game, so he really relied on his athletic ability, and the second that was sapped from him, he really fell off. He also suffered from the Shaq issue, as he was a terrible free throw shooter. And this one's kind of nitpicky, but a lot of the block shots he had, he sent them into the stands rather than keeping them in play. Instead of starting fast breaks with his blocks, he just pretty much ended it right there by sending them out of bounds. But that is rather nitpicky because overall, amazing defender, and he did his job as a paint protector all the time. While he never really had a post game or any true offensive skill set, he was very efficient in his prime. He was constantly near the top of the league in field goal percentage. He wasn't really forcing bad shots in his prime. That's why he was shooting close to 60% half the time. During his prime, too, he was also pretty much the unquestioned best center in the league. However, I will offset that, and he had no real competition during this time, as he had just missed the era of all the great centers. They pretty much aged out right before he entered the league. Dwight may have lost his finals appearance against the Lakers, but he did have a great showing overall. So that loss was not completely on his shoulders. He was blocking shots the whole time. He was getting all these boards. He had a great series versus the Lakers. He just couldn't beat Kobe. And on the second part of his career, when he became more of a role player, he played a big part in the Lakers' bubble championship, and that's how he finished with a ring. In conclusion, Dwight Howard, number 9 all time, and I'll argue that he definitely should have been on that 75th anniversary team. And honestly, he's had a better career than Melo. Melo just gets more recognition. And yes, I know they play completely different positions, but if Melo's on that 75th anniversary team, there's no reason Dwight Howard shouldn't be, because during their primes, Dwight Howard was definitely considered the more valuable player in the league. At number 8, we got Nikola Jokic. Some might say it's a little early for Jokic to be this high, but fuck him. He's already a 2-time MVP, 5-time All-Star, and 4-time All-NBA team performer. He's also easily, and I'm not going to argue with these Wilt fans saying Wilt led the league in assists one time. Nah, fuck that. Jokic is easily the best passing center we've seen of all time. He's also the most complete package offensively we've seen at center the whole time. His scoring repertoire, how he could shoot from the 3, he can score from the mid-range, he could even score on the block. Like, he has the most well-rounded offensive game we've seen from a center, and that definitely offsets his lack of athleticism. And I'm not trying to say Jokic isn't athletic or anything like that. Like, he moves really well for his size, but he's a big-ass dude, and he is not nearly as athletic as someone like Joel Embiid or Anthony Davis, some of the other bigs in the league right now. But he definitely offsets that with his complete offensive game. Of course, the knock on him is his defense, but he's not really a bad defender. He's just not the normal elite defender you see out of the center position when you're talking about a superstar there. So he normally gets that held up against him, but all in all, he's a super efficient center with already many accolades that normal centers don't even reach throughout their whole careers. And even though his Nuggets teams have underperformed in the postseason, he himself has had many great playoff performances. As you can see in his numbers, this man's almost a walking triple-double in the playoffs. With all that being said, let's get to number 7. And at number 7, we got David Robinson, the Admiral. David Robinson was a supreme athlete. You weren't supposed to be that size and that athletic. He used all his physical gifts to get him to 10 All-Star games, 1 MVP, 1 Defensive Player of the Year, and 10 All-NBA teams. Sorry for the typo right there. Also, 8 All-Defensive teams. Rookie of the Year, 1 scoring title, 1 rebounding title, and 1 blocks title, and 2 championships. The Admiral's offensive game consisted mostly of face-up play, as if he would face you up and he would just explode past his defender to get to the rim or use his reliable mid-range shot to keep him honest. Defensively, his agility allowed him to guard anyone and protect the paint at an elite level. He really was only rivaled by Hakeem Olajuwon in this, and Hakeem was a better defender overall, but he was the only one that could probably match Hakeem possession per possession on defense. Some of his negatives, however, are he really never developed a post game, and that could be due to him starting to play really high-level basketball at a later age, so he really depended on his athleticism, his face-up game, and such. Another issue with him is he tended to shrink in the playoffs and really didn't have any true playoff success till Tim Duncan got there towards the end of his career. Overall, Robinson had some great numbers, and if you actually just go off analytics alone, he would be considered the best center of the 90s. However, you go into his playoff numbers, even his playoff analytics, and you see how Shaq pretty much bullied him every time they played, and you see that's not the real case. So while he definitely was dominating during the regular season, he definitely shrunk in the playoffs, and for all this, he's going to be at number 7. And at number 6, we got the criminally underrated Moses Malone, the chairman of the boards, and the best Malone in NBA history. Fuck you, Karl Malone. Standing at 6'10", 260 pounds, Malone became arguably the best rebounder post-Jim Crow NBA that we've seen. He made 12 All-Stars, he won 3 MVPs, he got a Finals MVP, he made 8 All-NBA selections, 4 first and 4 second, 2 all-defense teams, 1 first and 1 second, and he was on 2 NBA anniversary teams. He led the league in rebounds for 6 years, and he finished top 10 in both points and rebounds, and more specifically, he was first in offensive rebounds. And of course, he was the unquestioned best player on the 76ers team that beat the Showtime Lakers in 4 games. Moses' game was definitely rebounding centric, but he had a great face-up game and was a putback beast who constantly made it to the free throw line due to that play style. And he was a good free throw shooter, so it was a very efficient style of play. Defensively, admittedly, his block numbers are very low for what we consider a really good defender, but he was still constantly challenging shots, being a menace in the paint, and that is why he was always considered a very above average defender. Never truly elite except for the year that he won or got selected as first team all defense or second team all defense. But every other year he was still a very good defender. One thing that does limit him offensively, however, is as good of an offensive rebounder he was never good at kicking it back out or making a good pass out the paint. And with him being the offensive rebounding beast he was, that could have been extremely valuable to his team. But overall, Moses Malone put up great numbers throughout his career and had a very strong prime against some legendary bigs such as Kareem, Robert Parrish, and etc. The chairman of the boards also bullied Kareem in the 1983 finals, almost averaging 20 points and 20 boards on his head in a 4-game sweep. In conclusion, Malone is just looking outside the top 5, and you can make the argument for him being at 5. And at number 5, we got Hakeem the Dream Olajuwon. All right, the Dream has 12 All-Star games, 1 MVP, 2 Defensive Player of the Years, 2 Finals MVPs, 12 All-NBA selections, 9 All-Defensive teams, 2 anniversary teams. He led the league in rebounds twice and in blocks 3 times. He finished his career top 15 all-time in points, rebounds, steals, and his first all-time in blocks. He also has 2 championships. Hakeem is arguably the best post scorer of all time. His post moves are legendary, and there's a reason they call it the Dream Shake. He is also easily the best rim protector of the past at least 40 years. I'm not going to count Wilt Chamberlain or Bill Russell in that, so Hakeem is the best that we've seen. He is one of the true two-way stars. He dominated on both ends of the court, and he was the unquestioned leader on both ends of the court for his team. He also had 2 legendary finals versus 2 all-time centers. He made Ewing shit the bed, and he little bro'd, admittedly, before prime Shaq the very next year. You can easily have him higher on your list, but for me, he's at number 5. At number 4, we got the most stat-padding motherfucker in NBA history, Wilt Chamberlain. Look, the NBA wasn't ready for Wilt Chamberlain. He was 7'1", 275 pounds. Very long wingspan, worked out with Arnold Schwarzenegger, all right? Like, he was stronger, faster, jumped higher, bigger than everyone else on the court. And he was able to use his God-given gifts, and the gifts he worked for, too, because that man stayed in the gym, to statistically dominate throughout his whole career. That led to him being selected to 13 All-Star games, 4 MVPs. He won Finals MVP once, 10 All-NBA teams. Sorry for the other typo. 2 defensive first teams, Rookie of the Year, 3 NBA anniversary teams. He led the league in rebounds 11 times. He won the scoring title 7 times. He led the league in assists once as a center, which is crazy. He's the all-time leader in rebounds and rebounds per game. He's 2nd in points per game. He's 7th all-time in points, and he was a 2-time champion. There are many tales of this man's physical dominance. He should have been the perfect player, but he couldn't shoot free throws. He was a notoriously bad teammate, and there are many accounts of him stat padding. He was too dominant regardless to leave him out the top 5, however. But his terrible playoff numbers should show you, like, they're not terrible, but compared to his regular season stats, his terrible playoff numbers should show you that whenever it came for him to truly be elite, most of the times he shrunk. And that's why he was Bill Russell's bitch. I'll keep it short, so let's just move on to number 3. At number 3, we got Bill Russell. Bill Russell used his 6'10", 7'4" wingspan to become arguably the best defender of all time and the greatest winner in sports history. He was a 12-time All-Star, 5-time MVP, 11 All-NBA selection, 3 first and 8 second. That's kind of crazy when you think about it. He won 5 MVPs, but was only first team 3 times. And they didn't have the all-defensive team for a majority of his career. They didn't have Finals MVP for literally his whole career, but he did make it to one defensive first team, and he probably would have won all 11 Finals MVPs. He has been selected to every NBA anniversary team there was, 25, 35, 50, and 75. He led the league in rebounds 4 times. He is second all-time in rebounds per game and in rebounds in total. He'd also probably be first or second all-time in blocks if they were recorded at that time. He was the unquestioned leader on 11 championship teams. But that doesn't mean he was a perfect player. His offensive game definitely took a backseat to his defensive prowess. That being said, he wasn't complete dog shit on offense. He was great at putbacks, and for his era, he was actually a very elite passer. Like, if this was 2K, this man's break starter would be on Hall of Fame, you feel me? Defensively, he orchestrated many great defenses, and he was probably the best defender of all time. I never seen him. Like, I can't say with a straight face I seen Bill Russell dominate. But from what everyone says, even though Wilt was way bigger than this man, Bill Russell was the one that everyone feared going to the paint. He was also, like, this is kind of weird, but he was also really good at blocking shots directly to his teammates so that he could start a fast break without even passing the ball. All that being said, all his nuances on defense, his leadership traits, he still was not that good on offense. If we're being honest, he was very inefficient as a scorer. However, when you look at his playoff stats, his efficiency definitely went up. His free throw clip went a little bit higher because he was shooting like mid-50s, I believe, in the regular season. Playoff Bill Russell was shooting at least 60%. And it went even higher in the finals games. His finals numbers are ridiculous, especially compared to his regular season numbers. His efficiency goes up. His rebounds even go up, and he was already rebounding 22 a game in the regular season. His passing goes up. Essentially, this man turns it on when he needs to. There are really only 2 knocks I can hold against Bill Russell from being like number 1 or number 2 all time on this list. The first one I already went into it, his offense. And yes, I believe if he chose to be a better offensive player, his defense would have not taken necessarily a backseat, but he wouldn't have been remembered as the best defender of all time, and he probably would have just been remembered as someone who averaged like 26 points, 22 boards a game. Yeah, he still would have got all those boards. That man was getting a bunch of offensive boards at the same time, but he wouldn't have gotten 11 rings because that Celtics team needed him to be the defensive backbone. The second knock against him is that he played in a league that had less than 12 teams pretty much every year that he won a ring. So there wasn't much talent in there. I mean, he was playing against plumbers, you feel me? With all that being said, let's get to number 2. And at number 2, we got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, formerly known as Lew Alcindor. Kareem used his massive frame to arguably become the most accomplished player in NBA history. While I don't believe that his wingspan is what it was as listed, because they weren't really measuring wingspan back then, that shows you how long this man paused, but how long this man appeared while shooting that little sky hook. Kareem made 19 All-Star games. He won 6 MVPs, which is the most ever. He won 2 Finals MVPs. He made 15 All-NBA teams, 10 first, 5 second, 11 All-Defensive teams, 5 first, 6 second. He made 3 of the NBA anniversary teams. He won Rookie of the Year. He won 2 scoring titles. He had a rebounding title. He won the block title 4 times. He finished his career top 3 all-time in points, rebounds, and blocks. And he was a really good passer for his time at center, of course. He wasn't passing like Oscar Robertson or Magic Johnson, but he was definitely kicking it out when he needed to. And, of course, he won 6 championships. Now, his offensive game, he was, like I said, he was a really good passer. He made good decisions when he had the ball. And that's about it. Nah, I'm playing, man. He had the most unstoppable shot in NBA history, the sky hook. That sky hook made him unguardable literally his whole prime, and even fading into his elder years. He was able to use that sky hook to still score efficiently whenever he was on the court. Defensively, he wasn't no slouch either. This man was blocking shots. He was protecting that rim. He was a really good defender. And as Kareem's stats show, he was amazing during his prime. His prime, top tier. The one nitpick I do have with him is that, let's just say this. He was very skinny and, like, 225. I feel me, I'm 215, but I'm also, like, 5'9". So At 7'2", 225, he started getting bullied as he got older on the boards, and he wasn't averaging as many boards as you'd expect your starting center to. Kareem did have many great finals performances, and he was a true winner. He won 6 rings. So with all that being said, why don't I have him at number 1? First thing that comes to mind is the era. He dominated in the 70s, which is known as like one of the worst eras of basketball. It's considered even worse than the 60s, which it is a debatable argument, but I can see why. The main reason being that during the 70s, pretty much half of the best players in the league were playing in the ABA, not even the NBA. The second one is really Mickey, I'm not going to lie, but when you get into the top 2, you can choose to be Mickey about certain things, and that is that he was only the true, unquestioned best player on his first championship. The next 5, you can all argue for Magic's team, and for most of them, it's not even an argument. They were easily Magic's team. And lastly, for Kareem, there were a few years during his prime where Malone, McAdoo, they were both better than him for a couple seasons every now and then. Meanwhile, my number 1 guy on this list, in his prime, when he was locked in, there was never anyone that was better at the center position than him. With all that being said, let's get to number 1 on this list. And at number 1, I got the Diesel, the true Superman, the big Aristotle, Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq is the biggest freak athlete of all time in all sports. 7'1", 325 pounds. And there were times where he was reported to be up to 350, 360. But regardless of that, he could still run the court. He was super light on his feet, and he could elevate with ease for alley-oops, putbacks, rebounds, everything. Shaq made 15 All-Star games, and he also had a few MVPs robbed from him. He should have won in 95, 2001, 2002, and 2005. But Iverson robbed him, David Robinson robbed him, Tim Duncan robbed him, and Steve Nash robbed him. Due to all that, he only finished with 1 MVP. But he definitely should have at least been a 5-time MVP. Shaq had 14 All-NBA team selections, 8 first, 2 second, and 4 third. He made the defensive second team 3 times. He made 2 NBA anniversary teams. He won Rookie of the Year. He won 2 scoring championships. He finished his career top 10 all time in points, blocks, 15th in rebounds. He's a 4-time champion, and he was the unquestioned best player in the most dominant 3-peat in NBA history. I know Jordan fans might get on me for that, but I wasn't alive. Well, I was alive for the Jordan 3-peats, but I wasn't watching basketball yet, you feel me? So I'm going to be biased right here. I'm a Laker fan, like I said, and those Shaq 3-peats were freaking crazy. O'Neal's offensive game consisted of a beautiful little post hook he had. It was ugly as fuck, I'm not going to lie, but that shit always went in. He has unstoppable post back downs, and he was just overall overpowering grown men in the paint. They made zone defense again, allowed in the NBA just because Shaq was just too dominant. He was also a very underrated passer. He was good at doing that little pass out to Kobe if he got the ball in the paint. It was like triple teamed. He was impossible to referee because he was just so overly physical. Defensively, he lacked focus in games that didn't matter, but he definitely always locked in the playoffs, and specifically the finals. And he was always a top-tier defender when it mattered. I will get into this man's flaws at the end, but as you can see by his stats, he was an absolute force in his prime. But the main reason he is number 1 is we've never seen a more dominant force at center. And of course, he's the best finals performer at center we have ever seen. He was completely unguardable and made NBA defenders look like children guarding him. Now let's get into the many negatives about Shaq. And I know what you're thinking. You got him at number 1. Why you got so many negatives? It's just that's how good he was, that no matter how many negatives this man had in his game, he was just so fucking overpowering that he was basically a cheat code in the NBA. First and foremost, of course, his free throws. Sounds like a broken record. I'm not going to get into his free throws. But yes, they were an issue. That's why Hack Shaq became a thing. But the more important thing that kind of derailed Shaq from any GOAT talk is his lack of work ethic. And I'm not saying he had no work ethic. If you're in the NBA, you had a work ethic. If you started in the NBA, you obviously had a work ethic. But he didn't have that Michael Jordan, that LeBron James, that Kobe Bryant work ethic. Shit, he ain't even have the Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett work ethic. And if he had a work ethic that matched his skill level, Jesus Christ, Shaq would have put up like 45,000 points and grabbed 20,000 rebounds. And I'm not just like over exaggerating. This man was just that much bigger, stronger, and more athletic than everyone. And the fact that he underachieved throughout his career, and yes, I do believe Shaq underachieved. I believe Shaq should have been the GOAT. If Shaq truly took care of his body, came into season in shape, instead of playing his way into the shape for the playoffs during the regular season, like if he truly came in top tier every year, he would have easily been the GOAT. There would have, like, how can you stop that? 7'1", 325 in the paint, you can't. It's actually kind of wild that even though he underachieved for his career, though, he's still, for me, the best center ever. And you can make the argument, like, people might say, oh, you being biased because you're a Laker fan. But even if you're not a Laker fan like me, you can easily make an argument for his prime being the best prime any center has had. Also, a little side note, I believe prime Shaq, if like Lakers Shaq was on that Magic team, they destroy Hakeem. Like, yeah, they might still lose because Hakeem had a better team, but prime Shaq specifically makes Lil Hakeem look like a baby. I say Lil Hakeem. That's disrespectful. Hakeem's probably the best defender ever. But Shaq did make a very similar defender routinely look like a child, and that's David Robinson. However, the Pistons loss is still inexcusable. I tack that more as like a team thing, though. That team was just, it's crazy that they even made it there because they had no chemistry whatsoever. And they showed when they got upset by the Pistons. I also believe that Kareem at 225 would not know how to handle a 325-pound Shaq just dunking over him all game. But with all that being said, that's all I got. Thank you for watching my first video. Please subscribe and comment. Any agreements or disagreements you had, I definitely want to hear them. And, put any thoughts you have for any future content. Once again, thank you for riding with me through this first video. Appreciate it, and later.